Now, let me ask you, do you know the UN came out and they said that, I think it was up to 90%, but around 80%, give or take, of their trucks had been, were being looted. I'm not saying it was all Hamas. I'm not saying it wasn't just people that were like, I just want to loot this, maybe opportunists. I'm not saying any of that.
Very interesting, because he's backing away from the claim that it was Hamas that was doing this systemic or widespread looting. But what he won't tell you is that many of the organizations that were doing the aid looting were actually backed by Israel. Israel backs an anti-Hamas armed group known for looting aid in Gaza.
So why do you believe this is a genocide?
Well, I think if it's not a genocide, then maybe we need to create a new word like we did in World War II for what's going on. Because I feel like what we're doing is we're kind of like parsing at definitions, which I understand is very, very important. But I feel like, what does that do to service?
The reality is although I do think it's important to describe what is happening in Gaza as being a genocide, and I do think that that's something that is worth even debating over, or rather, it's worth advocating over, right? It is something that I think we need to especially hold politicians and U.S. representatives accountable on. When it comes to these sorts of debate formats, I don't see a ton of value in debating whether or not it's a genocide with someone who doesn't even recognize what's happening in Gaza as being wrong, right? Like, if you're someone, for example, a lot of, various maybe more sympathetic pro-Israel liberals feel this way. They may see what's happened in Gaza as amounting to war crimes. They may even see the intentions of the Israeli government as being one of ethnic cleansing. Like, there are a lot of people who will go that far, but maybe they won't call it a genocide. Those are the sorts of people it's worth having the discussion over genocide over, and it's important to get them to admit to that fact. But like, if you're debating with someone who's so far on the other side of the spectrum, someone like Nick, who doesn't even believe what Israel has done in Gaza is wrong or amounts to war crimes, like, why are we debating genocide? Because then otherwise you're just going to get stuck on proving an even greater claim that you shouldn't need to argue over, right? You should at the very least start with the proposition that, hey, we can at least admit that what Israel's done in Gaza, whether it be the obstruction of aid to Gaza, whether it be the mass killing of civilians that's resulted in demographic data that is, unprecedented relative to other modern wars, even regional wars around the area. Like, can we at the very least admit that is happening? Right. And if the other person can't even concede on those levels, to me, it doesn't seem worthwhile debating the prompt of genocide.
What it does to service is placate what's going on there now and what has been going on since October 2023. So are we saying that's okay? That's good? I know you were talking about they haven't killed that many civilians. The civilians that they have killed, is that worth stopping? Like, out of those thousands of rockets, how many of those rockets actually hit? Like, if we're kind of making this calculus.
That's your question. You're kind of stopping the question halfway through.
Okay.
That's also just totally irrelevant. The amount of civilians, the proportion of civilians that have died in Gaza relative to the population of Gaza is actually pretty substantial. But just like the amount of civilians that have died in Gaza as it pertains to like a raw number is totally irrelevant to the question of genocide. Even the proportion is actually relatively irrelevant. Keep in mind, the only ICJ case that has found there to be a genocide was the Srebrenica massacre, in which I believe it was only 8,000 boys and men who died in that instance, and several tens of thousands of women and children were forcibly removed. Jazz Naz says, "Hi, what's up? How's it going?"
I guess my question is, what What would we call it if you wouldn't call it a genocide? What would you want? You just want to call it war? Okay.
Does that mean that there's no war crimes or no individual IDF members that have done nothing wrong and they're perfect? Of course not.
Sure.
See, but that's worth debating on, right? Because the claim shouldn't just be whether or not individual actors within the IDF have committed war crimes. That's something that's very easy for someone like Nick Mateo to concede, although I'd be very interested in actually hearing the individual instances that he would concede as being fundamentally wrong and that he wouldn't defend. But nonetheless, the threshold that we're actually looking for is that as a matter of policy, there have been war crimes, some of which involve starvation. Hence why the ICC chief prosecutor has indicted Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant for war crimes, right? They're not indicting these people just because they found instances of individual IDF soldiers committing war crimes. No. They're indicting them because as a matter of policy, as a matter of top-down orders and commands, there have been war crimes. As a matter of military strategy, there have been war crimes.
And again, as I said before, as they do, absolutely they should be punished. Just like I would say for the U.S. military. Again, I served for about 12 years. I would 100% agree with that. But your question of is it worth, what were you going to finish with that?
Well, I guess
Is the destruction worth a prolonged security and the indefinite meaning?
when I look at drone footage, and I think this happens to a lot of people that aren't even educated on the subject at all, and just seeing aerial footage of how Gaza has been flattened, how multiple leadership within the Israeli government talk about wanting to flatten it, wanting to starve them. And this is based,
Wanting to starve them?
yeah, I mean, the report from B'Tselem, that's an Israeli organization.
Yeah, I know them.
Right. Okay. So they said that the actions of leadership, when they're showing intent and they're saying, let's flatten them, bomb all of them. I know that doesn't mean those are all.
Flatten, yes. Anything that's an offensive capability by Hamas, I think they should absolutely flatten. I was just
Oh my God, dude. The problem is they think anything and everything has been considered to be an offensive capability. I mean, the idea that you can look at a map of Gaza today, like aerial footage of Gaza, see like upwards of 90% of the buildings either fully flattened or damaged. But I mean, entire towns, neighborhoods completely wiped off the map. And to look at that and just say, yeah, every single facet of what Israel decided to flatten posed a genuine national security threat and was being used as an offensive military capability by Hamas is asinine. And it's so disingenuous too, especially because considering we know that Israel targets low-level suspected Hamas operatives when they're at home with their family, not necessarily when they're in a home using it as a means to launch a military offensive on Israel. It's ridiculous.
I just was in the Gaza envelope about a month ago, and I still saw a pretty tall building standing. I think they should flatten them if Hamas utilizes it as an offensive capability. Do you know of an area of Gaza that before October 7th that Hamas didn't have control of?
No, they're the governing body. See, again, that's also just completely disingenuous question. The question shouldn't be whether or not Hamas has control over it. I mean, they're the governing body that won, by the way, in an election. I mean, obviously they haven't had any elections since, and I wouldn't stand to pose Hamas as being a particularly democratic organization, but they're the recognized governing body of the Gaza Strip. It's unsurprising that they would have control over specific areas. You can't just demonstrate that there's even like militants or members of the opposition within a particular civilian infrastructure to give legal or ethical justification for just flattening civilian infrastructure. You actually have to demonstrate that it is in some way or another strategically beneficial or necessary to your war aims or objectives. And to that, like, Israel doesn't really have any. Like, how many times did we hear that they were just in the Gaza Strip to get the hostages back? Well, the hostages are back. They haven't left the Gaza Strip. Now it's about getting rid of or destroying Hamas. They haven't gotten rid of or destroyed Hamas, but we do have now a more recent deal, which I still need to look into, about Hamas proposing to disarm. But I mean, even the far right is not wanting to accept those sorts of deals because it would involve some concessions from the Israelis.
No.
Does
So
Hamas have any military bases? Not tunnels, like military bases where they say, hey, this is our military or militant operations. This is where we store our weapons. It's secluded from the, like military bases, just like anywhere else. Do they have any?
I'm sure they do. Yeah.
Really? No.
No.
No,
So
definitely
they
not.
just you're saying they set up military
My
bases in
question
like
is, do we
civilian infrastructure? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
and that's why they needed to
Can
destroy
we
it.
both agree that Gaza is a densely populated area?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Okay, so if they don't have military bases, where do they do their operations out of?
They use guerrilla warfare tactics the same way like hundreds or dozens of armed resistance movements have fought against greater military powers.
Out of civilian areas. I mean, similar to
So
where is
their offensive capability?
where isn't the Mossad and the IDF based in Tel Aviv?
No, they're not based in Tel Aviv. They have an office.
They have a headquarters there. Okay. Yeah, in a very densely populated area, civilian area. But okay, I'm not making.
True.
I'm not
Not a military. Wait, hold on. That's not a military base. The U.S. military has
No, but they have the headquarters. They have the heads of like if anyone were to commit to top level assassination or decapitation attempts against IDF commanders, certainly some of them are going to be in Tel Aviv.
U.S. Navy recruiting stations, and that's not a military base. That's just an office.
okay, but
If they put their military base right smack in the middle of like a bunch of skyscrapers, sure, I'd be like, why are you doing that? That's ridiculous.
okay.
But real quick, my question is if they don't have military bases, they have civilian, they utilize civilian areas, densely populated area. What do they have uniforms? Hamas?
Hamas, no,
Yes, they do.
they do. Well, I mean, I guess they have like.
You've seen the propaganda
Visual signs,
speeches
yeah,
when they were releasing the hostages, and they were forcing them to do certain things. And they're like, look at the hostages we're
Sure.
releasing. They were all wearing military uniforms. What do they wear when they fight?
Civilian clothes.
Why? What's the
So they
advantage?
complain it's guerrilla warfare. Yeah, I'm not
But
saying
what's
it's not
the
terrorism. I'm not here to defend Hamas.
I'm not on to terrorism, although
It's guerrilla warfare. I think he has it. He has it on the nose. I mean, it's just like how exactly would you expect any sort of armed resistance group to fight against their colonizer when it's a fucking nuclear power? And again, like that, like to his point, we can have genuine criticisms of Hamas, and I think there are plenty. Shouldn't be shocking, right? But like these sort of Hasbara talking points to me don't come from a place of analytically assessing the situation.
yes, it is. I'm asking you, what's the advantage? Why would you take off tactical gear?
Would you blend into with civilians?
What's that called?
Did you want to tell me? Is this a
Human
quiz?
shields.
Okay.
That's not
Okay,
that's
cool.
not what human shielding is. Human shielding is a deliberate means to hide behind civilians and to maximize civilian casualties as a matter of policy. There's not the same evidence of Hamas operating in that. You can say that they endanger civilians. That's certainly within the realm, and that's something that Amnesty International and these other human rights organizations have criticized Hamas for. But they haven't gone insofar as to say it's human shielding.
All right. Do you think? Okay. So can we make a little caveat on the human
Of
shield
course,
thing? I'm
yes.
just curious what you think. So let's say there isn't a good example. People like to say like the Mexico example. If Mexico attacked us like October 7th, how would we respond? Right. I don't think that's a great example. I think maybe a better example would be what if natives came off a reservation that we have contentious, relationship with over the years. They came off and committed some atrocious terrorist attack. Okay. Those same natives retreated back to the reservation and hid inside an elementary school. Do you think Americans would be okay with bombing that elementary school, killing all the civilians there just to get to some terrorists? That's my question. Do you think Americans would be okay with that?
Isolate the area and do exactly what Israel did from day one and say you need to go to this zone.
He's not answering the question.
If you decide to wait, what is your question here? You're saying that they isolated this area as a red zone and all the kids are going to school that day?
No, I'm saying the
This is a
human
false equivalency.
I've never said it's gonna be a perfect equivalency. I'm trying to say the human shield argument. We don't just say, well, they're using.
I understand your question.
Okay.
So what you're saying is to get one Hamas guy, would I justify killing 500 Palestinians? No, of course not.
500. Oh, not 500, but maybe 20 or 30. Right? That's what actually ends up happening in the case of Israel. 20, 30, 15, 10. even if it's a low-level Hamas operative, even if it's their entire family. I mean, it's backed up by the demographic data. As many as like 5 generations of a Palestinian family have been wiped out. As many as like 14 members of a Palestinian like if you examine the demographic data, either from, I believe, Reuters did an investigation on this, so did AP. If you look through the demographic data, it's very clear that Palestinians are often targeted when they are with their family, not just hiding behind a random group of civilians, right? Not just like intending for maximum casualties to be levied against their own population, the way that Zionists like Nick love to characterize it as.
Okay.
Can you tell me of a time that happened?
Well, I mean, if you look at the ratios, it's up to at least 80,000 dead. And between 50 to 60% of those are women, children, and elderly.
1,000 and no.
Wait, but how do you know it's not 80,000? Israel doesn't really let journalists into Israel.
There has been journalists into Gaza.
A couple, sure, but like,
Not international journalists.
they
Been a
let
couple.
more influencers in.
Hank
than-
was in there. Yeah, it's whatever the guy from Fox News. He's not even particularly pro-Israel. He was
Oh, from Fox News?
in there. What are you talking about?
Okay.
You made your information from Piers Morgan, who keeps asking the stupid question about why did international journalists not go in? He's just wrong. I don't know where he gets it from. I don't know why people don't.
It's true. To the extent that international journalists are allowed in Gaza, it's like with the permission and guidance and constraints that Israel allows them to. That's just a fact.
Push back on him. Let me ask you a question.
Mhm.
How come before Israel actually took control of the Rafah crossing during this war, how come the international journalists didn't just go through Egypt?
I don't know. Great question.
That is a great question. Maybe if
Because Israel has an agreement with Egypt, and they ultimately control that border as well. Like, oh my God, we can criticize Egypt too. Oh, wow. What exactly does it doesn't say anything? Well, Egypt does it too. This is like the oldest fucking play in the book for these people.
it's because it's propaganda against Israel and they'd had no interest in actually going into Gaza.
So
They just would have went into Egypt and then they could have worked with Hamas, the governing authority at the time. They could have worked with Egypt. I don't think Egypt would have allowed them. I'll be honest with you, which is a totally different question.
Barred from Gaza for 2 years. This is in November of 2025. International journalists are still fighting for access. Israel's Supreme Court has again pressed the government to explain why. More than 2 years into the war, it still bars independent journalists from entering Gaza. Israel has blocked all independent press access to Gaza since the war began in 2023, meaning almost all on-the-ground reporting has come from Palestinian journalists who are already in Gaza. And by the way, we of course know that Gaza has been a hub for journalists being killed. Shocker. Palestinian journalists who are already in Gaza, journalists who are living through the war themselves, including NPR's own Anas Baba. International journalists have been fighting for access for more than 2 years. And earlier this week, Israel's Supreme Court prolonged that wait yet again. Again, November 2025. Wow. I guarantee it hasn't changed since, Nick. Guarantee.
Question we can ask.
So do you think all of because the like B'Tselem, when they say that it constitutes what Israel is doing a genocide, it's not really about the killing of Palestinians. It's more about removing the civilian infrastructure, food, starvation, that kind of stuff. That's kind of their argument. So what is your argument against
It's
that?
murder under the laws of war, in addition to creating the conditions unfit for human life in Gaza by destroying civilian infrastructure, right? By wiping out virtually half of like the housing in Gaza, right? By attempting to force people to flee. And Netanyahu has said it himself. In 2025, under testimony with the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Knesset, he said, "We are destroying more and more houses. The sooner Sooner they won't have anywhere else to go back to. Our only problem right now is finding a nation state that's going to accept Palestinian refugees. That's something that Netanyahu said, and it's obvious, right? Like Netanyahu, it's like they're so open with this. We don't even have to debate this. Netanyahu has endorsed the Donald Trump Gaza Riviera plan, and the Gaza Riviera plan that Donald Trump initially promoted as early as last year involved removing the Palestinians in Gaza, and he also specified that they wouldn't have the ability to return. Now, he did say, oh, well, they wouldn't want to return anyway because we'll make it so good for them in whatever country that we forcibly settle them in. But nonetheless, it did involve a permanent ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian population. And Netanyahu endorsed that. It's not like that's not even controversial. It's not even controversial. And this is like to my point earlier. It should be really easy to get these people to concede that at the very least, Israel wants ethnic cleansing. If you're unwilling to commit to the genocide label, there's no way you can get around the ethnic cleansing label. And if you've gotten them to concede that far, then they've already conceded that what Israel is engaged in and what its aims are in Gaza are fundamentally unethical and pose a grave crime against humanity.
That like, especially if you have leadership in Israel saying, yes, starve them out. Yes.
I don't know who you're talking about. I believe you, though, 100%. If somebody said we should starve them all to death, that is absolutely abhorrent. That's a disgusting thing to say. I don't agree with that. And if the government wants to do a better job of that, they should definitely, I don't know if there's something in Israel that's equivalent of censoring somebody, but they should do at minimum that and work on getting rid of that person. It doesn't do Israel any good.
Great. Yeah, I agree.
Censoring someone? What do you mean? Censoring Netanyahu? Is that who you're referring to?
And I've noticed that this has, since October 7th, and of course, a lot of the stuff has been going on online. There's a lot of anti-Israel, anti-Jew content all over Instagram. That's valid for sure. And anti-Semitism has blown up all around the world. This is making it so much less safe for Jews in diaspora. And so my question is, though, if B'Tselem is saying the leadership in Israel wants these things to happen, and you're saying that's not their intent, but effectively they are happening. So how does that
I don't think effectively anything you said is happening.
So people hadn't been malnourished and
Has anyone been malnourished? Yes, as a weapon of war, of course not.
What do you mean? What do you mean not as a weapon of war? What do you think happens when you obstruct aid, and why is it the case that the moment that Israel decided to completely obstruct aid to the Gaza Strip and didn't allow any aid trucks in for nearly 3 months, that just so happened to correlate with an uptick in deaths and cases of malnourishment and starvation, particularly from those who had comorbidities or who were already suffering from the lack of medical care and aid? In what way is that not a weapon of war? Especially when we know that Israeli intelligence, 2 Israeli intelligence officers told the New York Times, yeah, we don't actually have evidence of systematic aid theft from Hamas. And the U.S. State Department confirmed those very assessments as well, because most of what these people will end up telling you is they'll say, well, Hamas was stealing the aid. That's why we had to. I don't even know why that is a legitimate justification to blocking aid to the entirety of the 2 million Palestinians within the Gaza Strip. It's not. But even taking that premise at face value, it's wrong. Both the United States State Department's intelligence assessment pointed to the fact that there was no evidence of systematic, widespread Hamas aid theft, as well as 2 Israeli intelligence officers that told the New York Times the same thing. What there has been reports of is aid theft happening from several of these gangs within Gaza, many of these gangs actually armed and backed by Israel as collaborators, as a counterweight to Hamas. So again, it's most certainly a form of weaponized starvation. And it wasn't just in 2025. They also did it in the early months of the war as well, obstructed a ton of aid going in. And then there was pressure, I believe, from the Biden administration early on to allow aid in, but there were continuous ebbs and flows of certain months with more obstruction than other.
Why would you say that?
Well, I read the entire 80-plus page report on the IPC report where they actually got their information. First off, they had to establish a new standard that they have utilized, I think, once in the past.
See, again, this also, like the IPC reports, a lot of people will point to, and this is one of the frustrating things about a lot of these conversations, is Zionist debaters like Nick will latch on to maybe certain reports that were gleaned inaccurate or had outdated information or incomplete data, and those assessments ended up either being false or extrapolated in an unserious way. Or there was, like, for example, this Lancet report. It was like it wasn't even a study. It was a correspondence letter, and they'll take a look at that. They'll say, well, look, this information is incorrect, essentially, right? This is misinformation. Therefore, anything that you can glean from the accusations against Israel in this certain context are totally unfounded. And that's exactly what Nick is about to do now. He's going to say this report was false, therefore there was no starvation in Gaza, when we do have documented evidence of starvation in Gaza from dozens, if not hundreds, of people who have starved all the way to death, which requires a lot to starve completely to death.
Of mid upper arm circumference, right? And they established the lower end of that. Even then, they found that they couldn't even reach, I think it was 15%. They couldn't even reach that 15% with the full sample size that they gave. So what did they do? They ended up using a sample size that was half the amount. It wasn't the full amount. And they barely got over that 15%. And even then, they could still only claim phase 5 during just in the area of the Gaza governorate. There's 5 different areas of Gaza: North Gaza, Gaza, Deir al-Balah, Khan Yunis, and Rafah. They still could only apply it to that one area, which, by the way, has been a red zone. That Palestinians shouldn't have been in that area. But nonetheless, that's the only area they were able to apply it. Now, let me ask you, do you know the UN came out and they said that, I think it was up to 90%, but around 80%, give or take, of their trucks had been were being looted, not necessarily by
And I just covered this. Yeah. Oh, not necessarily by Hamas.
Hamas, just in general.
I have heard that they're being looted. I haven't heard that
the gangs that Israel was backing at the time, by the way.
That's been connected directly to being like an organized front that Hamas stole all.
I'm not saying it was all Hamas. I'm not saying it wasn't just people that were like, I just want to loot this, maybe opportunists. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying it doesn't matter, and I'll explain why. Let's say that truck, is supposed to restock Jabalia. Okay.
What is Jabalia? Oh, like that's an area. I don't know if it was a food or something. Sorry.
So let's say they're going to restock that, but it gets looted near the Keren Shalom crossing, right, which is down there towards the south.
I believe you.
What ends up happening to the stocks that were supposed to go to Jabalia? Regardless if it was looted by Hamas or aliens took it, what happens to the stocks that were supposed to be looted?
It's very interesting because he's backing away from the claim that it was Hamas that was doing this systemic or widespread looting, which is actually something that I just obviously referred to as to why it's total BS. But instead saying, like, look, it was just being looted. But what he won't tell you is that many of the organizations that were doing the aid looting were actually backed by Israel. Israel backs an anti-Hamas armed group known for looting aid in Gaza. Here's what we know. Israel is supporting armed groups of Palestinians in Gaza in what it says is a move to counter Hamas. But officials from the UN and aid organizations say the military is allowing them to loot food and other supplies from their trucks. One self-styled militia, which calls itself Popular Forces, led by Yasser Abu Shabab, says it is guarding newly created Israeli-backed food distribution centers in southern Gaza. Aid workers say it has a long history of looting UN trucks. Gaza's armed groups have ties to powerful clans or extended families and often operate as criminal gangs. Aid workers allege Israel's backing of these groups is a part of a larger, wider effort to control all aid operations in the Strip. And Unsurprisingly, so this was in June 2025. This was around the same time that they were taking over the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, this private foundation full of private mercenaries from the United States and Israel, that we were getting all these reports of them literally ordered to shoot at unarmed Palestinians seeking aid as a policing tactic, right? Here you have desperate people coming up to these aid trucks, desperately trying to get whatever aid they can for their family, and these private mercenaries just firing on them as a policing measure to disperse them, to make sure it's distributed correctly. But then, of course, you have dozens of deaths, hundreds of deaths, as a result of just firing on these unarmed Palestinians seeking food aid, in addition to hundreds more being just permanently wounded or injured from fucking bullets by these private mercenaries. And this is because Israel had undermined and derided the very UN organizations that were initially responsible for distributing aid. So Israel wants, just control of distributing aid. And they know full well that the armed groups that they're backing have been more, in alignment and responsible for actually looting said aid.
Sorry, not looted. Stockton and Jabalia.
Yeah, they get looted.
Right. They don't make it.
Yeah, they don't make
So yeah, does stuff like that happen? Yes. Does that mean that there could be pockets of people that are going hungry?
Does that mean it's okay? So if
No, it's not okay.
Israel knows that, let's say Hamas is stealing all of it. If Israel knows they are, so then they know it's hurting the civilians.
Thank you. That's a perfect example. Israel offered to help the United Nations and provide security, and the GHF actually came out. That was the American organization. They came out and they said, hey, all this extra food that you have, hundreds of truckloads of food that you are not able to produce out, we will take it for you and produce it, or give it out for you.
Yeah, the GHF, the organization that he's saying is so kind for offering to distribute aid for the UN. That's the organization where you had these private mercenaries just shooting at unarmed Palestinians. Pretty insane.
Yeah. The United Nations said no because they didn't want to work with them.
What? They didn't want to work with the private mercenaries shooting at unarmed Palestinians seeking food? Even when Israeli intelligence officials, in that same New York Times report that I just referred to earlier, had explicitly said that the UN organization was actually more effective at distributing aid than the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the GHF. Wow, very unsurprising. Here's another report. Convincing evidence Israel-backed aid convoy looters in Gaza. Israel-backed convoy aid looters in Gaza. Account of visit to Gaza by French professor describes Israeli military actions on security personnel protecting convoys. A historian who spent more than a month in Gaza at the turn of the year says he saw utterly convincing evidence that Israel supported the looters who attacked aid convoys during the conflict. Jean-Pierre Millure, a professor of Middle East Studies at France's prestigious Sciences Po University, entered Gaza in December, where he was hosted by an international humanitarian organization in the southern coastal zone of Al-Mawasi. Israel has blocked international media and other independent observers from Gaza, but Filiu was able to evade strict Israeli vetting. He eventually left the territory shortly after the second short-lived truce during the war came into effect in January. This was the ceasefire deal that essentially was handed off from the Biden administration to the Trump administration. The one that was eventually violated and called off, I believe, in March. And then that's when Israel imposed the complete siege and complete blockade of all trucks and aid. His eyewitness account, a historian in Gaza, was published in French in May and in English this month. In the book, Filiu describes Israeli military attacks on security personnel protecting aid convoys. These permitted looters to siege huge quantities of food and other supplies destined for desperately needing Palestinians, he writes. Famine threatened parts of Gaza at the time, according to international humanitarian agencies. US UN agencies at the time told The Guardian that the law and order had deteriorated across Gaza since Israel began targeting police officers who guarded aid convoys. Jesus Christ. So here's a case in which Israel's targeting specifically the people who were protecting the aid convoys. Israel considered police in Gaza, which has been run by Hamas since 2007, an integral part of the militant Islamist organization. Jesus Christ. Yeah, not good. In his book, Phil Yu describes an incident that he says took place very close to where saying al-Mawasi, a supposed humanitarian zone packed with hundreds of thousands of people, displaced their often destroyed homes elsewhere, when after continuous attacks on its convoys over weeks by local criminals, militias, and desperate ordinary people, the UN decided to test a new itinerary that aid officials hoped would prevent looting. 66 trucks carrying flour and hygiene kits headed west from the Israeli checkpoint in Kerem Shalom along the corridor bordering Egypt. And then north of the main coastline road, Phil Yu says, Hamas was determined to handle security for the convoy and recruited powerful local families along its route to provide armed guards. However, the convoy quickly came under fire. The Israeli military killed 2 local notables as they sat in their car armed and ready to protect the convoy, Phil Yu says. And 20 trucks were robbed. Though the UN considered the loss of 1/3 of the convoy a relative improvement on the looting of nearly all previous loads, according to Phil Yu. The Israeli rationale was to discredit Hamas and the UN at the time, and to allow Israel's clients, the looters, to either redistribute aid to expand their own support and network, or to make money out of reselling it in order to get some cash and not depend exclusively on Israeli financial support. So this is, once again, a case in which you have Israel backing these armed militia groups as a counterweight to Hamas, and then subsequently using them despite knowing that they are engaging in aid looting to both undermine the United Nations, saying, look, the United Nations is incapable of handling UN aid. And then Israel's also subsequently killing any Gaza police officers, saying, they're a part of Hamas. It's all the same. It's all, the Al-Qassam brigades. And these police officers, it's all the same. It's all Hamas. So they're killing the police officers. They're undermining the UN. They're backing these militia groups that are taking charge of aid. And there's really 2 reasons for this. The first of which is, once again, to undermine the UN, and so that Israel can actually take charge and take control. But also that these Israeli-backed militia groups can get money from this aid, so they don't rely exclusively on Israeli financial support. And then the other one was that so that they can gain domestic support within Gaza, right? Israel wants to undermine Hamas's position. Instead, if you have these opposition groups controlling aid distribution, the people who are coming to these aid distribution centers are going to be like, wow, this opposition group is much better than Hamas. They're the one who's giving us aid. Wow, they have so much legitimacy and governing legitimacy in the eyes of the Gaza population. Pretty fucked up.
Offered to help the United Nations and provide security, and the GHF actually came out. That was the American organization. They came out and they said, hey, all this extra food that you have, hundreds of truckloads of food that you are not able to produce out, we will take it for you and produce it, or give it out for you.
Distribute.
The United Nations said no, because they didn't.
Yeah, because the GHF, once again, shoots on unarmed Palestinians. Here's another report. This is the New York Times article I was referring to a little bit earlier. No proof of Hamas routinely stole UN aid, Israeli military officials say. Israel has long restricted aid to Gaza on the argument that Hamas uses it or steals it to use as a weapon of control over the population. On Saturday, the Israeli military announced new airdrops of aid. For nearly 2 years, Israel has accused Hamas of stealing aid provided by the United Nations and other international organizations. The government has used that claim as its main rationale for restricting food from entering Gaza, but the Israeli military never found proof that the Palestinian militant group had systematically stolen aid from the United Nations. The bigger supplier of emergency assistance to Gaza for most of the war, according to 2 Israeli military officials and 2 other Israelis involved on the matter. In fact, the Israeli military officials said the UN aid delivery system, which Israel derided and undermined, was largely effective in providing food to the Gaza's desperate and hungry population. Now, with the hunger at crisis level in the territory, Israel is coming under increased international pressure over its conduct in the war. Doctors in the territory say that an increasing number of their patients are suffering and dying of starvation, right? We're not just talking about an IPC report. We're not just talking about international NGOs like that exist outside of the Gaza Strip. No. These are doctors in Gaza are saying, hey, the patients I am treating are suffering from and dying of starvation. And it's coming at a time where just coincidentally, Israel is restricting aid to the Gaza Strip. So just maybe, yes, starvation is actually being used as a weapon of war, Nick.
I want to work with them, which I find insane, because if there truly is thousands, hundreds of thousands of people starving,
The goal is
death,
to help them.
right?
Yeah.
And you're going to be petty about it?
I get that.
That's insane. Now, the reason they said no is because they know it wasn't a systematic starvation. There's also a BBC article. You can look into it. There's a Palestinian woman in Gaza. Her name's on there. I want to say her last name was Khalil. I can't remember. It started with a K. Anyways, her husband died 5 years ago from cancer. So she was a widow with 3 children. She said that her neighbors, her children are crying because they are hungry. They don't have enough food. But she didn't blame Israel. She said her neighbors are all getting food because they're aligned with Hamas and she's not. And Hamas was giving them food. Terrible. This is her name on there. She's a Gazan woman, and BBC is not exactly pro-Israel. This is the same organization.
I believe you.
To say that Israel is doing some kind of systematic starvation technique.
No. What I'm saying is this: is that if Israeli organizations like B'Tselem themselves are saying
It's not just Israeli organizations. Like, it's obviously the case. We've already established through the numerous articles I've just listed off that there wasn't evidence of widespread Hamas aid theft. In fact, to the extent that there was aid theft and aid looting going on, it was Israeli-backed organizations that Israel had full accountability for, or should take full accountability for, and understood and knew what was happening. And so they use that as a pretextual justification to do starvation. And they know that starving the entire Gaza Strip is going to result in people in which are dealing with, malnourishment or starvation, such as the documented cases by those who these doctors were treating.
that if, in effect, people are malnourished, civilian infrastructure is gone. They can't live there. You are moving them out of there. That is a destruction of a people in whole or in part, and that constitutes
People out of
that.
there is not. In fact, the second to last page of the Genocide Convention specifically says cultural destruction does not suffice in order to simply dispersing a group.
Okay,
See,
beautiful.
but this is why I just don't like to do the whole genocide debate with people like Nick, right? Because like the next response to that would be, okay, so Israel's committing a cultural genocide. They're committing an ethnic cleansing. Do you concede to that? Like, instead of him actually saying Israel's not doing anything wrong, which is his real position, he's just going to say, well, it's not quite genocide to do a cultural genocide or an ethnic cleansing. So you're wrong because that's not the threshold of genocide. Right? Where like you should be more interested in these sorts of cases and trying to get them to concede on the bare basics of Israel's conduct being unjustifiable. Also, I noticed, and not sure how many people have asked this, so my apologies if you've gotten this question before. On the Jubilee, many identify, yet you've gone with leftists. What's your leftoid flavor? Many identify. That's a good question. I don't love to label myself, but like if you were to ask me, like if you want to pinpoint me on the left, if you want like where you think I align between the ML position or the Soc Dem position, I just generally say Democratic Socialist. That's generally what I would describe myself as. I do think political democracy is just as important as economic democracy or representation. I love a social ownership. I love a social ownership model of socialism. And I don't necessarily have strict ideas on how exactly that's to be achieved. I think it's going to be different in every case, but yeah, I would say that.
Well, I'm actually glad you said that, because then I really think we should come up with a new word, because I think what's been going on there, it has really, really broken people's hearts. Like, I was very, very pro-Israel prior to a lot of things that was going on. My heart broke during October 7th. I talked about it. I thought it was horrible. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and I'm not.
Do you think Hamas knew how Israel would respond with October 7th?
Probably, yeah.
Did they warn any of their civilians or do anything to build infrastructure? There's actually a report out that the rebar, the thing that the reason some of these buildings are falling when Israel bombs a building and there's a building that wasn't even touched that's collapsing. You know why? Because Hamas took the rebar that was supposed to go to that structure and they put it into their terror tunnels. So yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, but keep going.
Well, I guess we are all, especially as Americans, are going to have to answer for this, because Israel is our greatest ally, whether we want it or not, right?
Who?
Answer to the world. We are supposed to have some kind of moral authority when we go around and people commit atrocities around the world. We should have some kind of moral authority. Do you not agree?
Who are we answering to? Tell me specifically who we're answering to. The United States of America.
Our own moral authority. That's what we answer to.
My value is
our legitimacy on the globe on the world stage is being undermined, and nations, especially nations that are increasingly receiving economic development investments from China, are going to see nations like China as a more rational actor, because they're not doing unstable wars of aggression on Iran.
Not right.
Who?
Answer to the world. We are supposed to have some kind of moral authority when we go around and people commit atrocities around the world. We should have some kind of moral authority. Do you not agree?
Who are we answering to? Tell me specifically who we're answering to. The United States of America.
Our own moral authority. That's what we answer to.
My value is moral authority in terms of the future on as much as contemporary times. The security of that region is more important to me than the decision that many Palestinians made on October 7th and who they've supported up to this point. Did you know, if you were to take a guess, the Palestinians, the support that they had for Hamas, has it gone up or down since October 7th?
Up, probably.
It's gone down, actually.
Down? Oh, okay.
Maybe this is a wake-up call, and it's still not nearly as low as it needs to be, but maybe it's the opposite. What did we hear at the beginning, right after October 7th? Well,
oh yeah, we just need to fucking murder tens of thousands of Palestinians and, massacre and maim another 100,000 plus and wipe out the entirety of Gaza. And then maybe it'll be their wake-up call. It's so disgusting how these people describe literally like a fucking genocide and some of the most horrific war crimes we've seen in the 21st century. It's going to be a wake-up call for them. Wow, they'll think twice next time. Never mind the fact that before the Biden administration ended, Matthew Miller, I believe his name was, our State Department spokesperson, said that the U.S. State Department was estimating that Hamas has at least recruited as many people, if not more people, than they've lost. And even even Israeli spokespersons were saying this. What's his name? Daniel Hagari. Daniel Hagari once said, Israel, he said, Hamas cannot be destroyed. Which is funny because like Hamas being destroyed was one of Israel's supposed war aims. Israel's top military spokesperson said Hamas cannot be made to disappear, casting doubt whether or not the government's war aim of defeating the militant group can be achieved and drawing a sharp rebuke from President Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The idea that it is possible to destroy Hamas, to make Hamas vanish, that is throwing sand in the eyes of the public. Hamas is an ideology, is an idea. It cannot be destroyed, right? They understand that what they're doing is functionally radicalizing the population. And like, of course it would.
If you bomb them, you're just going to create more of them. The statistics actually show the opposite. Maybe suffering a little bit actually is going to cause them not to teach their children, hey, do what your dad did the last time and his dad before him. Maybe they'll actually tell their children to go to school.
Or they just kill the kid because as Israel... No.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking about.
No, we're talking because this is on the book so much that they're saying that the adult Hamas terrorists that are attacking us on October 7th today were the ones that were children we should have killed during the last war. So that's.
Hamas has added up to 15,000 new fighters since the start of the war, U.S. figures show. The Palestinian militant group Hamas has recruited between 10,000 and 15 members since the start of its war with Israel, according to two congressional sources briefed on U.S. intelligence, suggesting the Iran-backed fighters. God, this is just like unnecessary framing. Fighters could remain a persistent threat to Israel. The intelligence indicates a similar number of Hamas fighters have been killed during that period. So, in other words, they've recruited as many as have died. So, no, Nick. Killing people, killing tens of thousands of... Also, actually, this is a huge indictment because at the time this was posted... This was posted in January of 2025. There was at least like 50,000 deaths within the Gaza Strip, confirmed reported deaths. So, Israeli figures put the total militant death toll around 20,000. But this is an obvious indication. Okay, more than 46,000 people. But it's so obviously already, just by Israel's own numbers, this is an indication that they admitted that most of the population that had died had been civilians. But even though Israeli officials put the militant population around 20,000, U.S. intelligence suggests it's around 10 to 15,000 of Hamas members that have died. But also, we just read an article earlier where Israel, calls police officers in the Gaza Strip as Hamas militants and essentially part of the organization. Anyone who's ever done business with the governing body of the Gaza Strip is going to be considered Hamas in Israel's eyes. So that's one of my other issues is you'll often hear pro-Israel figures like Nick say, they never specify who was a militant and who was a civilian in the separation of the casualty data from the Gaza Ministry of Health. But that is not actually a simple question because what Israel would declare as being a militant and what maybe a sane person would declare as being a militant are actually two separate things, right? Is a militant just somebody who's actively on duty fighting? Is a militant somebody who holds some sort of senior position within the military or actually is armed in any way or has participated ever in fighting? Or can it be somebody who's just a low-level operative who does very little for the organization, especially from a military aspect? Is that person a military person, even if they're off duty, even if they have been off duty for let's say they're retired or they just haven't been working with Hamas for years on end? You have to serve in the military in Israel, right? It would be unfair, and nobody would say that killing Israelis in their home is killing Israeli combatants or militants because at some point in these people's lives they served for the IDF. Nobody would ever grant that argument, and yet it's always granted in the inverse because Hamas is not treated or seen as a governing body. They're just treated and seen as like a rogue militant terrorist organization. So, yeah.
That's how they're justifying going after civilian infrastructure. And that's undeniable. And would you not say that there is a
Do
slight...
you know what the percentage of children is in Gaza?
It's a high percent. It's a
It's
very
about
populated.
50%.
Yeah. It's
So
a
you know what the
very,
percentage of child deaths is, according to even Hamas's numbers, who I don't believe, by the way, because Eisenberg actually did a report that showed from their
This is bullshit, by the way.
April 2024 list to their June 2024 list, and anyone can go look at this. They
Okay.
can go pull up both lists and
I
put in
wanna
the
ask-
ID number. 1 second. They can put in the ID number, which is unique to every single Palestinian. And they found that it went from 18 years old to 17 years old. And this wasn't one or two examples. It was 60 to 65% of all of them that became magically children. So I don't believe them. But let's go with Hamas's numbers. What percentage of the death toll are children?
I don't know the exact. I think it was 50 to 60 were children, women, and elderly. So I don't know the exact. I think it was like 35 or something percent for children.
Give or take,
less
according
than
to
50. So
Hamas.
it's less than what it
Right.
should be. Is
So,
that your argument?
yes, I mean, it's scientific. No, let me explain.
I get arguing from.
Let me
that child is
explain.
dead. That mother doesn't have a child. You know.
You are strawmanning my argument. I did not say that that child, in fact, that child should be alive. And if his parents were better parents and they actually gave a shit about their children,
I don't
he
disagree.
would be alive. But unfortunately, we have parents in Palestine, Gaza, that rather go to the humanitarian zone and leave a 6-year-old girl in Gaza City. They'd rather have that than actually give a shit about their children.
What about this? Would you, if Israel's not committing a genocide now, will you at least admit that there is leadership, specifically in the Likud party and other parts of the Knesset, that are genocidal, have used genocidal language?
Party? Who in the Likud party?
Ben Gvir and
Not
Smotrich.
Likud.
Well,
There's Smotrich.
he's part of the current administration.
Yeah, I think Ben Gvir is a showboat. I wish he would shut the fuck
A
up.
showboat. Ben Gvir, who says resettle the Gaza Strip, Tehran must burn. We need to, flatten Lebanon. Who unabashedly, Ben Gvir, who has a mural or a painting or an image of the Hebron massacre shooter, a man who in the 1990s went into a mosque. Baruch Goldstein, I believe his name is. Went into a mosque and just massacred Palestinian worshipers in mass. Ben Gvir has an image of that guy hanging up, like a framed image of him hanging up in his room. To Nick, he's not an evil person. He's not a racist. He's not like an obscenely fucking horrible human being. He's a showboat. He's a little too brazen with his racism, guys. Like, that's the way he likes to describe it. Give me 1 sec. I'm gonna show you. But so initially he talked a little bit about this Eisenberg person, who, does investigations in the Gaza death toll and finds out that the Gaza Ministry of Health is actually lying about the casualty data. Well, there's this history PhD known as Matthew Cockerill. He goes by History Speaks. He's extensively debunked Eisenberg's BS, and I want to show you guys. Gaza Ministry of Health's redaction of thousands of deaths fueled doubt, but the data suggests something darker. So I'll read just some of the beginning, and we're not going to read this in its entirety, but I want to show you how, like, this person Eisenberg that Nick loves to cite is a charlatan, and like his investigations are total BS. In March 2024, 9-year-old Fouad Hamada was killed alongside his father and 3 sisters when an Israeli airstrike destroyed their home in Khan Yunis. In December 2023, 10-year-old Sarah Khalil Harb Kodea was shot in the head by an Israeli drone while sheltering in a school-tunneled refuge in southern Gaza. And in October of 2023, 16-year-old Aya Mohammed Abu Shawish was buried with her family in the rubble of their home in Nusret refugee camp. These children are not just mere numbers. Their deaths have been verified through eyewitness testimony and visual evidence, and their names appeared at least first on the Gaza Ministry of Health's official lists of wartime fatalities. But between August of 2024 and March of 2025, these names vanished. They disappeared as if their short lives had never been. They were among more than 3,000 casualties quietly removed from the ministry's public health records, some 1,079 of them being children. The delegation ignited controversy. Critics accused the ministry of deception. Some claimed these deaths of being fabricated all along. And one of those people is going to be this Eisenberg figure. Let me see if he actually names Eisenberg. Yeah. Among promoting these such claims was pro-Israel commentator Salo Eisenberg, Andrew Fox. Both promoted the claim that over 1,000 child deaths listed by the Gaza Ministry of Health had been fabricated. Such claims were then uncritically repeated in outlets including Fox News, The Telegraph, and The New York Post, helping fuel a viral narrative of deliberate deception. Eisenberg's figures were widely circulated. What is of concern is that neither Eisenberg nor Fox conducted independent field work or verification. Instead, they appeared to have drawn sweeping conclusions by procedural changes and used them to discredit all of the Ministry of Health's data. A move that they may have well aligned with their political agendas rather than commitment to evidentiary rigor. Their framing gained traction precisely because it fit a pre-existing bias in certain media ecosystems where Palestinian suffering is routinely minimized or cast into doubt. AOAV asked them to clarify their methodological basis in dismissing the deleted figures as deletions born from malice. They did not respond to requests for comment. Child fatalities of identifiable causes. Violent, 97%. Indirect, 3%. So just to go back up. In assessing and in investigating this, what Matthew's team found was that of these 1,079 deaths that someone like Eisenberg was claiming were just totally fabricated deaths, they confirmed that 36% of them, at the very least, died violently. 1% died from indirect deaths. So, think lack of medical care, disease, etc. 3% were erroneous claims or premature, meaning that they weren't actual. It was premature to determine whether or not they were died or that they hadn't actually died. Another 24% were also dead, but just an unknown cause, but confirmed to have died. Another 20% suspected, very likely, that they had died, and then 16% there was just inadequate evidence to assess either way. So violent deaths. In 42 cases, the violent cause of death is assessed based on non-definitive circumstantial evidence. And then the erroneous and premature claims includes disappearances, injuries, persons confirmed as being alive, or adults falsely listed children, and double counting. So in other words, to summarize, this Eisenberg figure did not do an actual investigation. What these people will tend to do is they look at errors within the Gaza Ministry of Health's data, like accounting errors, and point them to being evidence of the Gaza Ministry of Health having some malicious intent about lying about the amount of children who have died in Gaza. When it's actually, what's also ridiculous is so people like Nick, for example, he'll say, well, sometimes names were listed twice in the demographic data. Sometimes the age was wrong. Sometimes, again, clerical errors that you would expect, especially from the Gaza Ministry of Health that is operating under a war zone, a genocide zone. You would expect clerical errors to be occurring in that case. But nonetheless, they point to these clerical errors and be like, look, that must indicate that the Gaza Ministry of Health is faking or doing some sort of malicious some sort of malicious manipulation of the data. But that's not actually evidence of the fact. And sometimes the errors are from like adult military aged men. Like you wouldn't, if the Gaza Ministry of Health, if Hamas was behind some malicious intent to manipulate the data, you wouldn't expect them to double certain names that are of military aged men. You would only expect them to do to increase the amount of women and children who have died. But like some of these errors also applied to, once again, military aged men, which totally underscores Nick's idea or characterization of the Gaza Ministry of Health's clerical errors, and actually underpins the very likely scenario, which is these are errors that happen, and there are consistent corrections that actually happen with the Gaza Ministry of Health's data, which backs the idea that they're actually relatively trustworthy of an organization, or at the very least, they are operating in good faith with who they're reporting to have died.
Just to show him. And wait, but why do you want him to shut up? Because you don't want him to reveal how genocidal he is? Is that because it actually hurts? No. Sorry, it hurts the Israeli cause so much when they actually speak what they think?
Oh, I actually do agree. No, listen, I'm not here to defend Ben-Gvir. I think his words are abhorrent.
He's Hamas to me. He's the same. To me, it's no different.
Let me finish.
I think he's genocidal.
So let me finish, because you kind of are making it seem like I said this because of a different reason. No, I think he says a lot of immoral things.
Sure.
When he said all of Lebanon should burn. Is that what he said?
And for every tear of an Israeli mother, 1,000 Lebanese mothers should weep.
That was absolutely terrible. He should absolutely be out.
As a Christian, I can't stand for that. And it really hurts.
Human. I'm not Christian or Jewish or Muslim, but I didn't agree with him at all. And it's not because, yes, I do agree. It also makes Israel look bad because unfortunately the people on the other side, not necessarily you, they take his words and they say, this is what Israelis think.
Right. And that's so dangerous.
Yeah.
And there's been a conflation between Zionists, Israelis, Jews. Would you not agree?
Yeah.
Do you think that being anti-Zionist means you're anti-Semitic?
I think it depends on where it comes from, but I don't think it's an automatic.
But don't you know that
anti-Zionism? Well,
it's actually surprising that he's willing to concede that point. Voice sounds really good when squared up to the mic like this. Good mixing. Appreciate it. Yeah, I think this is supposed to be one of those mics where I'm actually supposed to be talking closer to it. I don't have one of those arms yet though. So eventually we'll get something like that. John Mearsheimer, who is the most famous international political scholar in the world, states that Israel's actions in Gaza is certainly a genocide, and Hamas is not a legitimate security threat. True. Both are true statements. Imagine complaining that a decentralized pseudo-state that has no centralized government and 90% of the population having no adequate housing to make mistakes on data. Exactly.
More American Jews under 30 today are anti-Zionist than pro-Zionist, actually. And then the largest contingent
report, it was actually what they felt about. See here. Okay, let me explain. So that poll was about their I don't know, it's a support or care for the Palestinians over the Israelis.
Right.
That doesn't mean you're anti-Zionist. Now, that's the problem, is that your side has taken the word Zionist and has really twisted it up.
Do not define themselves as Zionists. Do not define themselves as Zionists.
I don't know if that's true or not, but what do you think a Zionist is?
I think the term Zionist is like a Mott and Bailey argument where there's something very defensible, like Jews deserve a homeland for themselves. I won't argue against
self-determination in their land.
Sure, self-determination in their land. But then the actual Bailey is that we have to placate and justify all of these horrific
go to Israel.
Actions.
Half of them do not like the government, and they're all Zionists.
No, I know that.
You do not.
So this is actually interesting. I just recently re-listened to a Noam Chomsky debate from like 5 years ago where he debated the social media sensation, Zionist sensation, Rudy Rockman. And he opens with stating that like previously, Noam Chomsky would have been considered a Zionist. This is from Noam Chomsky's words, because Zionism at the time, or at least when he was advocating, it wasn't committed to a Jewish state. It was just committed to quote unquote self-determination within the homeland, which I find very interesting. But I think like Zionism to me is the commitment to a Jewish state. That's generally what I see it as to be. And obviously most people consider Noam Chomsky to be anti-Zionist, but then it also even depends, because sometimes if you say at all that you're open or advocate for a two-state solution, even if it's just for like pragmatic purposes. Some people will say that that's just inherently a Zionist position. So I think if you believe that Israel as a Jewish state, like by principle should exist, makes you a Zionist. That's generally the definition that I operate out of.
Not have to justify anything to be a Zionist.
No, I listen, I agree 1,000%. And Israel, I'm so proud of all of the Israelis that have been speaking out against this. And it seems like they speak out against it a lot more than Americans do.
How many Palestinians speak out against Hamas?
Not enough.
Yeah,
Not enough.
I wonder why one's a monolith more
And I don't-
isn't.
I don't
That's just not even true. Like, a lot of the Israelis who hate the Netanyahu government has nothing to do with Israel's treatment of the Palestinians. It's not as though there's just like a massive cohort of Israelis who hate Netanyahu, because it's true. Netanyahu is not like that domestically popular, but he is popular in the context of his relationship to his wars abroad, or his relationship to the Palestinians, right? If anything, sometimes they're a little bit upset with Netanyahu for not being more hard line or hard right on the Palestinian question. But like, it's not like to me that it there's a lot of people who are upset with Palestinian leadership, but like, Palestinian leadership is sort of a difficult thing to assess, because like, Palestinians weigh domestic popularity in two contexts. There's the governing context, which I think is obvious. That's generally how you would rate, your own leadership here, like generally how people view the president in our country. But then they're also rating the leadership as it pertains to a national liberation struggle. Like, how effective is our governing body doing at actually combating the in this case, the colonization of our land, or the occupation of our land.
think enough Israelis speak out. I don't think enough Zionists and Israelis speak out against genocidal Israelis.
Again, go to Tel Aviv. I promise you, you will see plenty.
I was invited last year, actually.
You will see plenty.
Final point.
I guess my final point would be, I do think we should come up with a new word, because I think it does such a disservice to start parsing words. And I understand definitions are important, but what we're seeing is an atrocity, and has been going on over and over. Atrocities have been committed against the Jews and Israelis, absolutely. But when they're returning civilian deaths for an IDF soldier who's somewhere where he shouldn't be, say Lebanon, in South Lebanon, and then they return with civilians dying after that, that's not a good equivalence. And that's not just regular war, because they're not two equal sides.
They're there by the
whatsoever.
permission of the
And
Lebanese government. I don't know.
Beyond them not being two equal sides, just as they are, they're absolutely not two equal sides because of us. We fund them, we support them. We have this whole pseudo-religious extremist support of them when it comes to the Christian Zionists in America, like Ted Cruz and Mike Huckabee, who's supposed to be the ambassador to the U.S., saying, yes, let Israel take all of it. I wouldn't care if they take all of it. Is that not wild? Like, that's
Mike Huckabee literally says there's no such thing as a West Bank. It's all Judea and Samaria, which is just a full admission that it's an apartheid state. They're like, it's not an apartheid state. The Arabs, the Palestinians in Israel, like, they have citizenship. But then it's like, okay, well, we're actually referring to, what about the West Bank? Well, that's not Israeli territory. Oh, it's not Israeli territory? Okay, then give us a Palestinian state. Oh, no. We can't have a Palestinian state. That's Judea and Samaria. There's no such thing as a West Bank.
seems a little... So
I guess it depends on what he meant by it. I'd rather see more Americas and Israels in the world than more Islamist regime.
He wanted a greater Israel project.
But if he just means to take all of it by like
Lebanon.
killing them and just like, no, I don't agree with that. But if he meant it in the sense of, would I rather see more Americas and Israels in the world and less IRGC?
I think he specifically meant the Greater Israel Project, which would mean annexing parts of like 6 different countries and starting wars. So I
don't know what he meant.
and now that we're ingratiating our military.
All right, I'm going to skip to Dr. Sabah. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. He was, so this is, he's like a community leader here in California, Palestinian community leader, or maybe just Arab community leader. And I know him because he's been on, if any of you have watched either the past 2 surroundeds that they've done on Palestine, whether it be the Ahmed Fouad Al-Khatib one or the one with Rudy Rockman, Ahmed Sabah. He He was on these videos. He's great. So we're just gonna watch his debate, and then we're gonna move on from this video. I'm not gonna fucking sit and watch this whole thing.
Bank, we have our first person coming up now. Please state your position.
First, I'd like to start by saying that I am a Palestinian American, and I come from a small town in the Middle East called Bethlehem. That's my hometown. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
Yeah, I was just there.
And before we get into the discussion and before we get into talking and debating, I may ask kindly from you not to say that you agree with me, because you don't, and not to say I fully with you, because that's a kind of show, in my opinion, that you're doing to the viewers. I am extremely disappointed with an American soldier or a veteran who served for 12 years in the Navy to still come and talk in so heartless way about the death of civilians, about the death of people, humans. You argued for the past hour and a half whether it's a genocide or not. And the way you mentioned and the way you talked about that was extremely disrespectful, ridiculing for the lives of fellow humans, Christians, many of them in Bethlehem. So I kindly ask you to keep it respectful, genuine, and not for the show, if you don't mind.
Everything I said was what I believe. I don't do this for a show.
I'm not saying about what you believe. I'm saying about how you said it. We have so many circuses in Vegas here and so many clowns there. We don't need any more clowns.
I can't, I'm not going to change the way I speak.
All right. Then you can simply say that. So you're claiming that there should be no Palestinian state for Palestinians. What's your suggestion on that? What's your alternative?
Well, first, there's many alternatives that are proposed, but I don't particularly care. The claim is that I don't believe there should be a Palestinian state in the West Bank. We're not here to determine what I think should or shouldn't happen. I do not want there to be a Palestinian state because I find it to be it'll just be another terrorist-ridden state that is...
Dude, these people are so predictable. At what point is Zionism literally just racism? It would just be another terrorist state. Like, what indication does, like, I genuinely don't know how these people hear themselves speak without the obvious inference that they're just fucking racist.
Is
Another
the
what?
proxy of the IRGC.
So this is definitely insulting for many millions of Palestinians who live there in Bethlehem, in Jerusalem, in Ramallah, in Nablus, in all the cities that...
By the way, like, when exactly have Palestinians been asking for a Palestinian state within the homeland, right? Since like the turn of the 20th century, and then, you know, since 67 within the West Bank or within Gaza, or if you're just referring to a two-state solution, since 1967. How long has the Islamic Republic of Iran existed? Right? The IRGC has only existed since like the early 1980s during the Iran-Iraq War. The Islamic Revolution was in 1979. You think that Palestinians only exist, and that's just the way that they frame all of like these people's history. Same thing with Lebanon, same thing with Yemen. They just frame all these people's history as just like a geopolitical adversary of Israel and in alignment with Iran, which is like the biggest check to Israeli hegemony in the region. They see their identity as human beings just tied to that. And it's insane.
that are in the West Bank.
Jerusalem's not in the West Bank.
Palestinians who lived there for centuries before the establishment of the Bogue State of Israel, the terrorist state of Israel that you're supporting, the state that has kids signing their names on rockets before they launching them at the kids of Gaza, a state that teaches its citizens how to be racist from kindergarten age, a state that
It's
killed...
a great point, right? The only terrorist state we need to be worried about in that land is the one that's currently operating, and it's by the name of Israel.
So many Americans, whether at USS Liberty or throughout the years, it saddened me that someone like you supports such a terrorist regime.
Or just take now, right? Israelis don't have to explicitly kill Americans. They just have to convince the American president to go to war for them against Iran and get, 17, 18 U.S. servicemen killed thus far? Another additional hundreds injured? U.S. bases in the region fucking destroyed. Our interceptors and THAADs and everything that we need for, like, U.S. security completely depleted. That's what Israel has resulted for the United States.
And go out strongly talking about their values and their fairness and all these things. So for us as Palestinians, when we look at someone like you talking about these things and rejecting our basic human rights and human dignity by having our own self-determination right, I don't understand where's that coming from.
Do you want a state or do you want self-determination or both?
I want anything that will give me a dignified life. I don't mind living side by side by Jews in one land, in one state. I don't mind that.
I don't mind Arabs living there either.
Who are you to say you don't mind? You're an American.
We're debating the topic.
I'm not asking you to mind or not. You just agree with the idea. You don't want Palestinians to have a state, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that is correct. But I just want to say that
you call them terrorist people. You call them proxy.
I do not think that the Palestinians are all terrorists. I didn't say that. You're misrepresenting my words. And also,
you said that a Palestinian state would just inevitably be another terrorist proxy of Iran. That's literally what he said.
Who are you? And listen, you're right. I'm not Jewish. I'm not Arab. But I have every right to have an opinion on this matter, just like anybody else.
Having an opinion about something is different about going around publicizing and promoting strongly such an ideology.
Yep, I'm an American. I can do that. That's true.
Watching an ER show doesn't make you a doctor. Watching Law and Order doesn't make you a lawyer. Watching Fox News doesn't make you a political analyst or
agreed 100%.
Right? So
I feel bad that Dr. Saba got convinced to do this. I mean, he's great. He's an eloquent speaker, but like, this is just such slop content, dude. And like fucking Nick Mateo is not somebody who's worth engaging with. And you have this, this man who's literally suffered the consequences of a brutal military occupation, whose, family and lineage has inevitably also suffered said consequence, and whose people are currently undergoing a genocide. Sorry to throw a random flashbang into the stream, but did you see the DEI bike lines shit from earlier today? No, I didn't.
You can say, I don't agree, you don't say, but you don't have the right to dictate on us Palestinians to decide what we want to have and how we want to.
I don't think I ever said what you guys should decide. I think you're really emotional arguments right now. I never said what you should decide. Decide for whatever you want. You have every...
but
this doesn't get us anywhere.
I have families who are
murdered. But that's not the same as misrepresenting my arguments. Tell me one time I ever said that I am going to decide what you should think. I never said that, ever. I said that I'm giving my opinion and my opinion alone, and I have every right to do that, not just as an American, but as a human being. And you have no right to tell me that I don't have that.
You're taking that right from me.
I don't. I think you should.
But that's also, this is sort of like the dynamic that I recognize is really fucked about a debate like this, is they're literally debating whether or not Ahmed Saba and his people should have rights. Right? He's debating with somebody who doesn't believe he should have rights. The right to a national homeland, the right to be a member of a nation state.
Absolutely have every right to tell me your opinion. That's why we're talking. How am I taking that from you? We're speaking right now.
So what are we talking about here? What are we trying to...
You're not taking it from him, but you're advocating for the position and the status quo that inevitably leads to the Palestinian people not having national rights.
To discuss here.
Right now, I'm asking you, how did I take that away from you when I flew all the way over here to come speak with you and others? What part did I take your right to give your opinion or your beliefs?
I want to have a homeland.
You have every right to say that. When did I say you didn't?
I'm not saying about me saying. I'm saying we're debating. The claim is you're saying Palestinians cannot have a land, cannot have a state.
I'm saying there should, my opinion, not yours, that there should not be a Palestinian state in Judea and Samaria, what you call the West Bank.
And why is that?
That's my opinion.
So what are we doing here? Are we discussing?
He
your
literally asked why. Are you fucking deaf, Nick?
opinion?
Sure.
What we're trying to do. Here?
I'm going to repeat what I already said before you went off on the emotional tangent.
I didn't go.
I will.
didn't go- You're the one who's so emotional today, and actually creating a little circus here. So
Okay.
don't start that way, please.
Anyway, so once again, I believe that the ideology and the culture of the Palestinians, which I find to be problematic for the Palestinians themselves, although that's not my concern, is problematic for the security of the land, even to the other Arabs.
So you're saying Palestinians inherently are violent people. They want to kill people right and left.
I love a straw man argument. I don't
It's not a straw man. That is like necessarily entailed by this idea that Palestinians are incapable of having a state without it being some terrorist threat to those around them.
believe
what I'm
anyone's
trying to understand-
inherently. I said their culture and ideology. That's not inherent.
Dude, this is like, it's the classic fucking conservative doctrine that it's like, no, we never essentialize a people. We just describe them as a people and as their culture as being one of violence.
Inherent means from birth.
Okay, you're saying that
Say the words that I
Palestinian culture-
said. Don't
you're
tell me
saying-
what I said.
Okay, I'm going out with your statement. You said the Palestinian culture is violent and wants to kill
I
people
never
around them.
even said violent
What
or
did you
kill.
say?
I didn't. I said it's problematic for the security of the region. And
The
also, I don't
Palestinian
believe,
culture is problematic.
I also don't believe, especially when offered multiple times, but I do not believe in just giving.
It's problematic for the security as the region. He says this as he backs Israel's war of aggression on Iran that has literally led to a wider war within the Middle East and has actually been not only a security threat for all of those in the region. I mean, how many countries have been bombed as a consequence of this war of aggression on Iran that has, culminated in like literally the invasion and subsequent occupation of southern Lebanon, or the fact that Israel is literally pushing beyond their illegally annexed border in southern Syria and are now, I believe, making way for like new settlement projects there as well. It's always Israel's security, by the way. Like, by principle, what Nick wants is whatever is secure for Israel, but not secure for the region. So it's totally disingenuous for him to say it's actually about the security of the entirety of the region that we need to have no Palestinian state. I'm sorry, is a Palestinian state under threat of invading and occupying other sovereign nations that border it the way that Israel is currently doing? Is a Palestinian state going to be a nuclear threat that doesn't actually openly discuss its nuclear arsenal, or doesn't openly even acknowledge it with like U.S. intelligence for that matter? It's so asinine, dude. It's just racist at the end of the day.
Especially Judea and Samaria, to a people who, again, have rejected it multiple times that I don't think actually want it. Maybe you do. I'm not speaking for you. But on top of that, because they do enough acts of terrorism and kill enough people, and so the international community starts talking about
the Israeli army is committing a lot of killing and terrorism. Why
Even
they
if
get
that was
right?
true, that doesn't change anything that I said. You're trying to use a whataboutism right now, right? You're saying, well, the Israelis did it too. Even if I agreed with you, which I don't, what does that have to do with what I said?
It has to do with it because Israel's terrorism and terrorization of the Palestinian people and domination over their lives is what causes Palestinian armed violent resistance. And even when Palestinians attempt to negotiate and do diplomatic solutions to end their own occupation and colonization of their land, Israel meets them with subsequent terrorism and violence.
We're trying to establish some standards for your claims. Why are you saying that? Are you just had a dream? You woke up this morning, you said that's what you think about Palestinians? Or there are certain foundations and principles behind your statements? You're saying Palestinian culture is not to be trusted, not to be, cannot live in peace. Is that what you're saying? I'm trying to use your words.
Yeah, I'm saying that the Palestinians have had a history of undermining not just Israel, but even surrounding
Why
Arab
would they
nations.
do that? Let me know. Why would they do that?
You tell me why they tried to kill the third Egyptian president. You tell me why they killed the
No,
king of
well,
Jordan, why they killed the prime minister of Jordan.
Israeli- who
Tell me
killed-
why
who
they
killed
sided
Rabin?
with
Who
Saddam
killed Rabin?
Hussein.
Who killed Rabin?
Yeah, an Israeli, and I'm
Okay,
glad
so-
he was arrested and he's not celebrated.
So listen.
Thank you. That's the point. You just proved my point.
I didn't prove
He's
anything.
not celebrated.
prove anything.
He's
Don't
not.
put words
He's
in my
not
mouth.
promoted. Whereas Hamas terrorists and others
Have you watched the movie
are
The Patriot?
promoted.
Have you watched the movie The Patriot?
Yes, a while ago.
What did you think the British royalty thought of what's his name, Benjamin Marley?
I probably didn't like him. I'm not sure.
You
what
didn't
your
like him,
question-
the hero of the movie,
You're asking me what the government thought? I'm sorry.
the royalty, the king, the king of England. What did they think of those Americans who were fighting for their freedom?
Yeah, I assume they wouldn't like people fighting
Correct.
for their
And that's
freedom.
what you're doing exactly. And Palestinians were living in prisons.
This is a false equivalency. This is
It's
ridiculous.
Perfect.
Don't tell me
analogy.
that because another people did it, therefore I must be doing the same thing. Just tell me why I'm wrong.
You're wrong because you're not looking at the history of imprisonment and brutal
didn't answer my
occupation.
question.
I am.
You didn't. You said when I brought up how they've also undermined surrounding Arab nations, you said, what do I mean? And you cut me off as I was explaining it. Why did they side with Saddam Hussein where Kuwait had to kick them out? Why did they do the Palestinian insurgency?
When you say that,
the
you're talking about
You
Kuwaiti-
know who also sided with Saddam Hussein in the Iran-Iraq War? The United States. We funneled money to Saddam Hussein. All right, I'm done with this video, dude.